Yo, and welcome back to the LOP show. This is Leadership on Purpose. I am Blake Bozarth, and with my co-host today, Chad Pike. What's happening?
What's going on, man? Time to get better on a Monday.
Time to get better on a Monday. I love it. So hey, this is another jam session, guys. We're gonna do some content that we actually do as part of our growth groups with companies. So when we're helping develop leaders at some of our client companies, we take them through different modules. And today's theme is around radical ownership. So I can't wait to dive into that. Before we do that, a little personal item I want to check up on with Chad. Chad, you got into pickleball this year. How is the pickle treating you lately?
I did. And let me tell you, it has been a blast. It's been so fun, but it's so humbling. Like, I hate to say this on a podcast, but I don't win very much right now. I have so much fun and I try so hard, but I don't win a lot. And I get beat by a lot of people in their 70s, unfortunately. Like,
Hey, that is life, man. That is life. It is a humbling sport. It's a fun sport. I was a part of, I think, your first run of this, right? When you came down to Orlando, and
yeah,
they took you out on the courts, had our
that's
initial crowd
right.
meetings on the court.
That's right.
Yeah.
There was when I got back, I took my wife to go play up at a park near our house, and we had the paddles and we were just kind of hitting around, figuring out, we didn't have anyone else to play with.
Yeah.
And a guy walks up to us. He's like probably 75. Looks like he's got a fanny pack on. I was like, cool, okay, yeah. He was like, hey, do you guys mind if I jump in and play a little bit? And we are like, yeah, sure, come on. So he like ties his dog up, comes on out, starts playing, and he taught us how to play with 3 people, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And he demolished both of us. And we're
That's
both former D1 athletes. He waxed us. Well, come to find out, what I thought was a fanny pack was actually like a heart pump. Like 75% of his heart is pumped externally on the pack. He kicked our butts.
what?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well,
But to be fair, he was like big time referee. He played competitively for a while before he had his heart surgery. So
no, that's incredible. It's an incredible
let's go
sport.
well, but I could win more.
Those of you in the audience who know me well know that I'm a pickleball evangelist. So I call it, it's my pyramid scheme. Like almost every pyramid scheme, no one makes any money in it. I'm in it for the life change. And I like to have my downline of like, how many people can I get into pickleball? I think I'm at 22 and counting right now. So you got to produce for me though, Chad. You've got to get more people into pickleball.
Okay, yeah, and then do like my wins whenever I get them, hopefully in the next decade, do my wins and then my subsequent wins, do they funnel up to you as
We got to
well?
figure that out. We got to figure that part
Yeah.
out. That's starting to
You
get a
gotta
little
figure out
tougher.
the incentives.
I love it. But hey guys, so we're excited for today's session. We're jamming about radical ownership. And Chad, let's just kick it off with, when you hear this term ownership mentality, what comes to mind for you?
I think about taking responsibility. I think about taking responsibility for every area of your life. Sometimes, like, this is leadership on purpose, so we're primarily career focused. So I'll kind of start there. When I think about taking responsibility for your career, sometimes, especially in bigger companies, it can be easier to expect to be fed things, to expect to be fed opportunities, knowledge, like opportunities to develop skills, where I think radical ownership kind of flips it on its head and says, no, it's my job to go out and pursue additional skill sets, to pursue additional knowledge, to pursue additional experiences, because no one cares about my career as much as I do.
That's so true. And if that's true, I love that statement. Nobody cares about your career as much as you do, right? That should be true. And hey, let's hope that you have an incredible leader, an incredible manager. We want to be that leader where we're actually pouring into others and we really do care about their careers. But the bottom line is, nobody should care about your career as much as you do. So what's the significance of that? The significance to me is that you can't be passive. If that's the case, if that's truly the case, that nobody cares about your career as much as you do, you cannot be passive. Passivity kills. I can't tell you, Chad, how much of a time that when we're working with different leaders or aspiring leaders in organizations, how often we encounter people who are frustrated in their career, right? And a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times when you're talking to them, it's like, oh, what are you frustrated about? Well, I'm not getting opportunity at that, but I'm not getting promoted. I'm not getting recognized. It's like, when you put the question back to them and say, okay, well, what have you done about that? Well, I've done this, I've done that. Well, have you had a direct conversation with your manager? Have you had a direct conversation with your even senior leaders as to like what you want to experience and the type of exposure that you want to get? Well, not really. I guess I haven't really done that. Have you taken any kind of new credentialing or any kind of practical training programs that actually build your skill set and show that you have? Well, I guess I really haven't done that. It's amazing how much of the time that people get frustrated in their careers. It's because ultimately they're being passive. They might have the desire for career growth, but they're not being proactive and really taking what we would call a radical sense of ownership, right? So it's one thing to have an ownership mentality. It's another thing to say, hey, I'm going to take an extreme level of responsibility for my life, my leadership, my career. And it means that you have to drive it, right? Can't be passive.
Yeah, I think it's just it's a mentality shift. It's a complete shift in your mindset to go from, "Well, I should be given this," to, "I need to go out and earn whatever it is that I'm looking for," and doing it the right way. I think about, like, how does this play out on a Monday? How does it play out on a Tuesday? And I'm big on trying to I wanna distill things down to, like, what do I need to do tomorrow? And sometimes it is blocking time on your calendar, like a little bit of white space, even if it means you have to show up at 7 AM. Sorry. Like to study for another credential or to take on a side project or whatever it is that you want to do. And sometimes I'll let you in a little secret. Sometimes you can take on side projects outside of your normal job to help you build experience into doing things that you want to do. And I have a very personal example of that. Like the reason why I am sitting where I am sitting today is because I did that.
Amen.
I was not super happy in a corporate job that I had, and Blake, you and I were friends, and you said, "Hey, I've got this opportunity. What do you think?" And so from 7 to 8:30 in the morning and 5:30 to 7 PM at night, I started working on it. And next thing you know, about 6 months later, we're ready to roll. And my career transitioned more into the direction I wanted it to go. And we're still figuring it out, and it's still a process, and I'm learning that, like, I have to drive, and I'm even seeing my own sometimes, like, bad corporate habits of being like, "Well, you need to do this for 18 months or this for 12 months," and all
Right.
the
Right.
things like, that's good. It's good to have development pathways, but it's
Mhm.
also you should always be asking yourself, "How can I accelerate my development? What do I need to do?" And that's a great question to ask your manager and your leadership.
That's so good. One thing I'm struck by in your example too is the way you took initiative. It's like, hey, I'm not super happy with the role that I'm in right now. Instead of wallowing in that, I'm actually going to do something about it. I'm going to start to gain a new set of skills. That's ultimately what you did in this case. But wherever you are, it's like, what can you do? It might somebody else may be treating you unfairly. It's not to say that they're not. We're going to cover that in a second, actually. But your response matters, right? And the way that you take radical ownership, no matter what somebody else has done, no matter what somebody else has not done that they should have done, maybe the way that we take personal extreme responsibility for ourselves, how we respond, the initiative that we take to improve our situation, that makes all the difference. So I want to hit on something. We talk about two contrasting postures. One is a posture of victim mentality. I've been done wrong, or hey, maybe I've been working on this project and it blew up, or this other department or team didn't do what they were supposed to do and they dropped the ball on me, or I was releasing this new product and the market just totally shifted, the economy changed. And the question is, what posture do we take, right? Is it one of victim or is it one of victor? And so much of that, back to what you said, Chad, it is about mindset. It sounds like the soft things, but this is what separates really successful people from non-successful people is the way they respond to adversity. So even if it is someone else's fault, right? You really have been done wrong objectively, you've been done wrong. Do you choose to take a posture of victim or do you choose to say, you know what? I'm going to improvise. I'm going to adapt. I'm going to overcome. And that's the posture of victor. That's the mindset of victor.
And here's the hard part. Being a victor is like if I decide tomorrow, hey, something has gone wrong. It wasn't my fault objectively, but I'm going to be a victor. You have to be a victor, I guess, have that mindset for an extended period of time. You might be good on it tomorrow, but that it's going to be getting up every single day and choosing to be a victor, choosing to identify ways where you can take responsibility for things. And I mean, I can tell you this one thing I've learned on my journey actually is when we take responsibility for things, that maybe even shouldn't be our responsibility, it actually opens up opportunities to do more of the things that we actually want to do. It's funny how the world works that way. So I would just encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're kind of in the spot where something has gone wrong, Maybe it wasn't your fault and you're deciding whether or not you want to take responsibility for it. Just choose to take responsibility for it and engage and execute. And I bet when you look up 6, 9 months, maybe 12 months from now, there's going to be opportunities that are available to you because you chose to do that.
So there's a great story from Jocko Willink. A lot in our audience would know that name, Jocko. And he has a famous TED Talk. You can Google it. But he basically tells a story of here he is a Navy SEAL commander, right? He's leading some kind of mission in Iraq. And everything that could go wrong basically went wrong in that mission. And there was crossfire even among the American soldiers and the friendly Iraqi soldiers, right? Um, an Iraqi actually lost their life. A friendly Iraqi lost their life in that. And some of our own American soldiers almost did. They could have gotten severely injured. So everything blows up, everything hits the fan, right? If you look through the story, basically his superiors come in, they fly, and they're like, what the heck went down, right? His first natural reaction is what all of our natural reaction is when something like this happens, right? And that is, well, so-and-so, they were supposed to do this and they didn't do it. They were supposed to prepare X, Y, and Z. They dropped the ball. And this guy, he was supposed to make sure this was being communicated and covered, and he didn't do that. So he dropped the ball. He thought through all of these faults, right? And the story goes, he ends up asking the team in front of the superiors, hey, why did this happen? Like, whose fault is this? And you saw individual team members raising their hands saying, well, I did this, or I did not do this. I take the blame. I take responsibility for this. Kept on going around the horn. People were individually raising their hands. As the leader, though, he says, no, it's not your fault. Each time it's like, it's not your fault. And guess what he does? The dead giveaway. He takes extreme ownership. He takes responsibility for that mission. As the leader, that's what we do as leaders, right? It doesn't absolve someone else from accountability. If they've made a mistake, they've done something wrong, it doesn't absolve them from accountability. But as the leader, when we take an extreme, a radical level of ownership and responsibility for the results, that's what we're supposed to do. It's our team. It's our whatever it is that we're owning, we have purview over. We should be taking that radical level of responsibility and ownership for. So think about that for you. And wouldn't you want to work for a leader like that, right? When you make a mistake, that they have your back and they say, you know what, in front of their superiors, I'm going to actually own this for you. Doesn't mean that they don't go back and say, hey, we're going to fix this going forward. And I'm going to drive accountability to make sure it doesn't happen again. They coach to that. But that's a great example to think about. Okay, it's not just about ownership mentality. It's what does it look like to have that extreme, that radical level of ownership and apply that to your work?
What you make me think of right now, I'm reading this book, Leadership by John Maxwell. It's 11 shifts every leader needs to make to level up their leadership. One of the shifts that he talks about is from perks to price. A lot of people want leadership because of the perks that comes with it. Title, respect, authority to make decisions, compensation, all those things. Whereas he's like, to really be an effective leader, we have to shift our mentality from, I don't want leadership because of its perks, but I'm willing to pay the price of leadership. And one thing that he says in there when it comes to paying the price is everything worth having is an uphill climb. And if you're the leader, you have to climb first and you have to climb farther than anybody else. And that to me is the essence of radical ownership as a leader.
That's good. That's rich. And I read that book a few years ago when it came out, and you make me want to go back to it again. It's really good. So one other concept I want to make sure we hit. So we talked about victor versus victim mentality. I want to also contrast this fault versus responsibility, right? So when we think about when something goes wrong, our natural reaction is, whose fault is it? Or when we've been done wrong, our natural reaction is to dwell on, oh, that's somebody's fault that I'm in this predicament. But if we if we shift that mindset from, hey, yeah, it's their fault. I can acknowledge that. It's not like I'm letting somebody off the hook. It can be someone else's fault, right? But it doesn't matter whose fault it is when it's my responsibility to do something about it, right? When it's my responsibility, whatever that outcome is you're taking ownership for, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. What it matters is, what am I going to do about what's next, right? What step am I going to take to improve the situation going forward? I can't control what someone else did. I can control my reaction, my response. And when you make that shift, Chad, and actually learn, there's a great viral video. You can look it up on YouTube, Fault versus Responsibility, Will Smith, the great philosopher Will Smith, which by the way, happened before his Oscar incident. It's interesting the way that went down, right? But he tells us in a very compelling for the record. But what's amazing about it though is that when you don't focus on the fault, instead you focus on responsibility, that's actually, it's an act of self-defense in some ways, because even if you are a true victim, right? And that happens. There are true victims in life that have been victimized by someone else. But when they shift to, hey, I'm going to focus on what I can control. I'm going to take responsibility for my own reaction and my direction from here on out. That is taking your power back. And that's so empowering. And that's an extreme level of ownership that if you're willing to do that, when things go wrong, if you're willing to say, I'm not going to dwell on the fault, I'm going to actually focus on my responsibility. And that is my reaction and how I'm going to improve things, how I'm going to take ownership for me going forward. It's actually extremely empowering.
That's so good. So when you talk about taking responsibility, it makes me think about how our leadership is contagious. And so if you're leading a team and you model taking responsibility, that is contagious. And you will now have a team that sees it's okay for me to take responsibility. That's what I should do. And they will begin to do it. So our leadership is contagious, both positively and negatively. And so when we model taking responsibility, that becomes contagious and it becomes a positive compounding effect. And that's how over time teams accomplish their goals. They realize their visions.
It is contagious. It's one thing to level up our own radical ownership, right? To become more extreme in the responsibility that we take for ourselves and for our leadership. It's another thing to think about, okay, how can I get my team? How can I influence the people around me? Maybe they don't even report to you, but how do you influence the people around you? Because that's also a common complaint that we get when we're working with companies is like, wow, I feel like in today's day and age, there's a lot of entitlement in the workplace. There's not a lot of ownership, right? There's not a lot of ownership. There's not a lot of people actually taking extreme responsibility. So how can you be that? The first thing is what you just said was it starts with example. And one particular question I want you to ask yourself is think about the last time that you modeled what does it look like to take responsibility for a mistake that you made, to actually admit, acknowledge that, oh, I dropped the ball in this way. And I'm not just going to brush over that. I'm not going to act like it didn't happen. I'm not going to minimize it. I'm going to acknowledge it. And I'm going to do it in a way, especially if you're a leader managing a team, I'm going to do it in a way that shows my team what's it look like to take ownership for a mistake. We all make mistakes. It's one thing we hear that a lot from leaders. It's like, oh, I'm not perfect. I don't expect you to be perfect either. But they might say those things, but in the way that they behave, in the way that they lead, do they ever show the vulnerability of when they make mistakes? I know this was hard for me. This has been a hard part for me in my leadership is having that vulnerability. The more that I've stepped into that over time, the more that I've actually been intentional to say, hey, I'm going to not just act like something didn't happen. I'm going to lean in and say, guys, I dropped the ball. I messed up here. For instance, as when I get an assignment from someone that comes back on the team and it's not quite what I wanted, if I'm honest with myself, 90% of the time that happens, that I don't get the results that I want, is because I failed at setting the right clarity of expectations of what I wanted. I didn't do a good enough job painting the picture for what a success looked like. And instead of me being frustrated and saying, oh, that's their fault, when I'm taking extreme responsibility, when I'm taking radical ownership, I say, I dropped the ball in the way that I communicated to you. And maybe I didn't set expectations for what it'll look like to check in. Maybe I just said, hey, just run with this. And I was too empowerment. We'll have another module on this, but empowerment is all about giving clarity and extending trust. Maybe I just gave all the trust and I didn't give enough clarity of like, what does it look like to be successful in this project? What does it look like for us to be in sync on this project? And I, as the leader, have to model. I have to come back to my team and say, you know what? I dropped the ball. Ask yourself that question. When's the last time you authentically owned a mistake and modeled that for your team? If you're doing that sort of thing, back to your point, Chad, it's contagious. Your team recognizes that. They respect you more for that. They trust you more for that. And then for themselves, you've shown them that it's safe to do so. And they also can take that kind of extreme level of responsibility going forward.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is it's good old fashioned time, like lean into one-on-one coaching and protect that time. If you have a team and you want to create a culture of ownership and you want to build a team of people who take responsibility, you have to coach to that. Not just clarity on assignments. All that needs to happen. That's blocking and tackling, but it's also carving out the hour a week or the 30 minutes a week to have the developmental conversations with people and driving toward ownership as one of the values of the team. I think sometimes as leaders, it can be tough because you have your own things that you have to deliver on. Like you have your own tasks where you need to put your headphones in or block time on the calendar and put in focused work. It's not just leading, and it's not just delivering tasks to people. You have to actually do your own work. And sometimes when we as leaders get overwhelmed by the tasks that we have on our plate, it can be easy to say, well, I need to move this one, I need to move this meeting. But really, as leaders, if at the end of the day we are trying to deliver results to people, that's some of the most important and impactful time. And so there has to be like a disciplined pause to say, no, like this is a strategic priority, and I need to keep these meetings here, and I need to find spaces where I can get what I need done outside of these meetings. And sometimes that's, if you have too much on your plate, that's an opportunity to identify, what can I hand off? What is an
Yeah.
opportunity for someone else? And then you're back to giving clarity and extending trust, just like you
Amen.
said. So you're creating opportunities for ownership.
That's so good. One thing I'd add too on the one-on-one front is that I can't tell you how many times as well in my corporate career, I had one-on-ones with my team or with my direct manager. And those one-on-ones, even if they were supposed to be a career-focused one-on-one, so like, hey, we're not talking about projects and tasks that you're working on. We're actually digging into the the harder things around development gaps and strengths and where we want to see more from you. That's the stuff that we typically let slide. And so if you have one-on-ones, making sure that you're not only protecting the one-on-one, as you said, Chad, but you're also protecting that time, because it's very easy to let those devolve into, oh, I know we're supposed to talk about your development areas and how we can work on X, Y, and Z with you, but let's just update on the usual. And it's very easy to let that happen. But if you're coaching well and you're trying to build this culture of radical ownership, you're actually pouring into them, you're supporting them where they need to be supported, you're praising them for the strengths that they have, what they're bringing to a table. You're also identifying areas where it's like, you know what? Here's some areas where I feel like your potential is being limited because you're not performing as high, or you need to grow in this skill set, this soft skill, this hard skill, whatever it is. That is modeling radical ownership too as a leader, and protecting that time in your one-on-one is actually really key for that. We actually interviewed in the first season of this show, Maya Grossman, and she talks about, in that episode, she talks about how can you help someone grow an ownership mentality. So Chad, I want to hit it to you. So put yourself in the shoes of, you have a mentee or you have a direct report, someone else around you that you're like, I know they're struggling with taking ownership. How can I get them? How can I expand this ownership mentality with the people around me? How would we do that?
I think we would do three things. First, we would make sure that they understand the business, would help them understand the business. I think it is critical for us to help people when we're coaching ownership to be able to, we have to help them zoom out so they can see the entire business instead of just seeing their one task or their task list. They have to understand what's happening and how the entire engine runs. I think about it this way: experts simplify things, whereas a novice will overcomplicate it. And so, as the leader, we want to coach ownership. We honestly need to try to simplify the business model as much as we can when we're doing big picture thinking, so folks can understand and begin to make connections in their mind of how everything fits together to drive results. And then you
Yeah,
do
I'll add to that too. If we think about where the root term of owner mentality comes from the way an owner approaches their business, right? And the owner, they understand their business. They understand all the different moving parts. And if you think like the small restaurant owner, who is the guy who, if the toilet needs to be unclogged, he's making sure that toilet's unclogged. He'll do it himself. If the floors need to be mopped, they're doing it themselves. They had the whole purview of the business, and they're not just like, oh, I'm a cashier today and this is what I'm doing. The larger the company you're in, the easier it is for someone to be siloed. And it's almost impossible to have an ownership mentality if you don't truly understand the way the different moving parts fit together. So the best thing you can do, the number one thing you can do if you're trying to help somebody grow an ownership mentality, is to help them think like an owner, to truly understand the business and approach it that way. To that point, number two, approaching it that way, owners, they do more with less. So think about it as a manager. If you've been a manager before, you've been given a budget for your cost center, however it's defined, right? Most managers, 90% of managers, they think about how they can make sure that that budget is optimized, but they want to make sure they spend that whole budget, right? That's just kind of the way corporate works. Is an unfortunate thing, but they're trying to make sure they spend that budget a lot of times because they want to make sure they get the same money or more for the next year. They come in too below. A true ownership mentality, though, as opposed to the manager mentality on that, they're thinking about how at every opportunity, how can I actually get more value with fewer resources? So how can I, if I had half the team size If I had 5 people instead of 10 on my team, how could I actually get more done? If I had half the budget for my team, what will we do creatively to get things done? That's the way owners think. The same way when, we do real estate investing, Chad. I know you're embarking down that path as well too. When we're doing a project, we're doing a flip, we might have an overall budget in mind and we usually try to double it because that's what happens a lot of times. You get surprised by things, right? But you better believe as owners on that, at every single turn, we're looking for how can we save money? How can we actually get more value with using less dollars, right? That doesn't come naturally when you're inside a big company, honestly. And if you want to have an ownership mentality, that's what you coach someone to do more with less. Finally, hit us with the last thing, the third thing.
Yeah. The third thing to do when coaching ownership is going outside your job description. Simply put, if you want to do something different and elevate your career, you have to do something different. So that's raising your hand. It's raising your hand for opportunities. And when you're coaching people, coaching them to do that and rewarding that and praising. Praise people who go outside their job description and constantly give people opportunities to do it and to lean into new experiences.
The key to career success is never found on your individual job description. It's always somewhere beyond that. If you think about that, the people who have accelerated their careers the fastest are the ones who are recognizing needs, gaps that may not be in their particular siloed kind of role, may not be the accountability of that particular role, but they see it and they can't let it slide. They do something about it. Back to that of taking initiative, it may not be their particular responsibility, but they're going to be the one who solves it. And that's what if there's anything you want to do to accelerate your career, demonstrating an ownership mentality by going outside your job description to say, oh, you weren't the one that was supposed to be thinking about that. This other team was. Yeah, but I recognized that it was impacting my team and I wanted to solve it for the customer. That's what radical ownership looks like. So coaching them on those 3 things, understanding the business better, doing more with less, and then finally going outside the job description. That's how you grow and develop ownership mentality. So this has been a fun jam session, man. We had covered a lot of ground.
Session. Radical ownership is taking responsibility. That's shifting from a victim to a victor mentality, and then being able to recognize the difference between fault and responsibility. It might not be your fault, but when you take responsibility for it, you get your power back.
Boom. I love it. Hey, we'll see you next time in a future jam session.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe I have more pickleball wins then.
See you guys. If you enjoyed this episode, the best thing you can do is be a river, not a reservoir. Who could you share this with that could also get value from it as well? Until next time, keep leading on purpose. Peace.